Hello everyone and welcome back to my devlog. So on Monday I kicked things off in a new project and began working on the input controller as I had to deal with swipe gestures and the accelerometer. Next I went into the player controller and began working on player movement. The idea is that lateral movement is moving left and right and longitudinal movement is moving forwards and backwards. Lateral movement, however, brings its own set of problems as the player has to rotate around a pivot point at the center of the level. This graphic demonstrates what I mean. At the beginning, player 1 and 2 are at the same lateral position on the circle, however are different distances from the center. When both players are rotated at an equal angle, it is clear that the arc lengths at which both of them travel are different. And so I have to account for the fact that as the player's radius increases, their angular velocity must decrease in order to maintain a constant linear velocity. I achieve that using the following formula, where W is the angular velocity, V the linear velocity, R the radius, and theta the angle at which the pivot must be rotated. And here is the result of that. On Tuesday I created the camera controller script where it lerps to different positions based on whether the player is crouching or aiming. I then went on to create a speed system where the maximum speed changes based on whether you're crouching or aiming, walking or sprinting. Next up was jumping. I wasn't using a rigid body at the time, so I had to implement my own system for gravity. Don't worry, I do use rigid bodies in the end, but it was all a process. The reason was because I was using a transform system to move the player. However, that would mean I would have to use a kinematic rigid body, which would ignore collisions, and so that's what I ended up working on next. I implemented the system where I'd use ray casting to determine whether objects in front of the player were immovable. Again, I changed all of this later. On Wednesday, I figured that the movement system I currently had in place was not the way I wanted to go, as I wanted to use rigid bodies in order to make use of Unity's physics system for gravity and collisions. After quite a bit of time, I ended up figuring out how to achieve this without making the player a child of the center. However, I found a post online that made me completely rethink what I was doing, and I went back to my old movement system. After a bit of bug fixing, I was happy with the movement system, as all the physics with regards to the collisions and gravity were working just fine. Next on my to-do list was dashing or rolling, where the player will be able to dash left or right and roll forwards. On Thursday, I went to Mixamo and downloaded a placeholder character and a couple of animations to work with. I then went onto Unity and created a blend tree for all the animations to work together. After I finished, there were still a few issues with sliding, and so I had to tweak the animation speeds. I was happy with movement, so I moved on to jumping. The platform was a cool way to see this jumping in action. Last of the animations I wanted to implement today was aiming, and for this I needed to create an avatar mask that would control only the upper body. After a couple of funny issues, I finally got it working, but it wasn't quite right. The player would sway when moving and aiming, and when crouching the player just completely deformed. I thought this might have been an issue because I was using the generic animation rig instead of the humanoid one, so I tried switching over. Unfortunately, it wasn't as simple as I had hoped. On Friday, after looking at every single Unity forum thread, I finally figured out what the issue was. I had to unassign the avatar mask that was being created from the model of the animation and reassign the avatar mask from the player's character model. After doing this, everything worked out just fine. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I was now using the humanoid animation rig instead of the generic one. However, I was still getting that annoying sway issue. After looking through a couple more Unity forums threads, I finally figured out that it was because I had not baked the rotations of my animations. I now had to change all of the animations, so that was of course fun. There was then this annoying head bop that I noticed, so I quickly removed a property from the dope sheet of the animation. For the rest of the day, I just worked on a placeholder crater model. Emphasis on placeholder. I'm definitely going to redo it. I just used it to see how it would feel in the game. And even though it was probably the worst model I've ever seen in my life, after importing it into Unity, it actually gave the effect I was looking for. So yeah, that is where I currently am at this stage of development. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment below. I would also greatly appreciate if you could smash that like button and subscribe to follow along. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.